Good evening, blog viewers. We'll continue with the video post tonight, and this will go in our wisdom series. We'll be talking about Carl Jung again, the book Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. We'll discuss it later. But I want to talk again. I want to return to a concept that we've been talking about in the various posts, but I want to sort of drill down on it a little bit more. I think is a pretty important distinction, and that is the difference between verbal form and underlying substance within reality. Now, we've sort of mentioned it, but I think these things lie within a continuum. Some things, I think, are pure verbal form. There is no substance in reality. It's just the only reality that exists in the statement is the words themselves strung together, the letters, the sentences. Even it can be books, but the only thing that's real there is the words. And of course, since words don't have life, they're not living. There's no underlying reality. And those are things that are pure verbal form. Then you have things that are pure substance. There's no form. There's no verbal form. Or if there is some word that we describe it, it's not. It's just used to describe something that basically everyone would agree is pure substance. It's not, the word is not sort of adding any reality to it. It's just a word we use to describe the thing that has pure substance. So that would be the second scenario. And then the third one would be, I think, which are most things, which is a combination of pure form and some substance. So there's some form, there's some verbal form, but there's actually some substance as well. Within sort of a 0 to 100 scale, maybe you've got 10% form, 90% substance, maybe you've got 90% form, 10% substance, maybe 50-50, whatever it is, but there's a little bit of each. There's a little bit of form, or actually it's sort of inverse. There's a little bit of form, then you're going to have a lot of substance, or vice versa. I think everything sort of fits within that metric. And I think the key point here in a blog that is discussing the human virtues and focused on the human virtues and focused on human perfection and human good, the point of discussing this is not just to make an academic distinction. The point of discussing the distinction between verbal form and substance is that if something is pure verbal form, then it's obviously not a reality within life. And if it's not a reality within life, then then it can't affect your life within reality. It can affect your mind, and it can affect you in other ways, but it can only do that if you accept it within your mind. You don't have to confront it within reality, as reality or within life, unless you accept it as the verbal form that it is. You accept it within your mind, unless you take it seriously. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about it. If something is pure substance, on the other hand, then you have to make it a part of your life. You have to take it into consideration. You can't avoid it because it's there. It's within reality. It's real. It's a part of so I think we use the term the one everything. It's part of the one everything. It's part of everything. It's part of life, and you can't just avoid it through some sort of mental game or mental conception you have that says disputes it or disagrees with it. And if something is part form and part substance, then I think you only have to take it into consideration to the effect that there is some substance. You don't have to take into consideration the part that's form, but you have to take seriously the part that's actually substance, but no more. So I think that's sort of a theoretical discussion, but I think these comments will become more clear if we go through some examples. And for each one, I'll sort of try to give my assessment of to what extent we're dealing with form and to what extent we're dealing with underlying substance. Let's take something like 90% of the commercials you see on TV. Everyone watches TV all the time now, or even on the internet. There's a lot of TV, and most of these things, I think, if you think about it, if you actually watch the commercials, it's mainly form. There's usually, nowadays, there's not much real relationship between the commercial and the product. Car commercials are some you can watch them. I mean, I don't have to go through the examples, but if you watch many commercials, you see there's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of extraneous stuff that has nothing to do with the service or the substance of what's being sold. And so those, I would say, are mainly form. How about something like gravity? Gravity is pure substance. It's there's no denying it. You can try your own experiment every single time. You could do this for your whole life. Every single time that thing will fall, and it falls because why? The force of the entire Earth is pulling down on this and pulls it down. Gravity, interestingly, scientists don't even know if there's a particle that carries it. So it's just there. It's always there. You can't. And if you drive over a cliff somewhere, you're going to feel the effects of gravity. So gravity, or even the Earth. The Earth actually is, interesting thing I found out the other day, reading on Wikipedia, the Earth is moving at about 18 miles per second. And it's a sphere, and like any sort of bowling ball, its natural inclination is to just roll at 18 miles per second out into space and to continue drifting. Now, the only reason it's not doing that is the sun has a gravitational pull on the Earth that is huge, because the sun is many, many multiples the size of the Earth. The mass, I think, is 330,000 times the mass of the Earth. So that's pulling on the Earth, and it's doing so in a way that's perfectly keeping the Earth at 93 million miles. And the Earth is sort of wanting to keep going, but it can't, because the sun is, for a couple billion years now, has just been exerting that same gravitational force. So gravity I would label as pure substance. What about various cliches like money can't buy happiness? It's kind of more murky. I think, that's probably a mix too. I mean, money can buy a vacation, money can buy a bike, money can make a donation to a worthy cause. Those things make most people happy. Most people are happy when they go on vacation. Most people are happy upon purchasing a bike or a car, and most people are happy donating to a car. So money can't buy happiness is not strictly true. So there's part verbal form in there that doesn't correspond to reality. But if you can think of someone that's sort of obsessed with money and thinking about it all the time and working all the time for it, then in that scenario you can say, okay, probably this person is not really happy. They're not using their money. They're working too hard for it. They don't have time to enjoy it. Then you can say, okay, now there is some reality to that aspect of it. So it's kind of a mix. How about the cliche, don't worry, be happy? That seems like it's closer to pure form. But if you stop worrying, you're going to suddenly be happy. Does that make any sense? Just decide to get up one day and not worry about all your problems or not deal with them. You're just going to be happy. That doesn't make sense, because your problems are going to start to pile up, and you're not thinking of solutions to the things that definitely need solutions. You can't just not worry about anything. So I don't think that's right either. That's probably more pure form. But for someone that's probably stressed out all the time and worrying about something, that might make some sense. If they worry less, if they relax a little bit, they'll probably get a little happier than they are. How about the statement, all lawyers or politicians are crooks or dishonest? Well, that's probably a little bit form too, because you can think of some great politicians, some great lawyers that have done great things and are not crooks. People like Mandela or Lincoln, Jefferson, some great lawyers that have existed, ACLU lawyers or Supreme Court lawyers that have had some incredible results. So that I would say is, but there's probably a mix. There's obviously crooked politicians and dishonest lawyers. So that's, again, something you have to look around and make individual assessments, I think. How about the statement, marriage is natural? That seems like it's largely form. Well, what's natural about marriage? There's no marriage in nature at all. If the statement is it's natural, there's no marriage in nature. No species other than man gets married or has marriage ceremonies. Dogs are not getting married. Birds are not getting married. Worms are not getting married. Plants are not getting married. Planets are not getting married. You can go on and on. It's not natural in that sense, or it's the wrong word to use. So that's pure form, I think, or largely form. and and even for the human species, I think, even for our species, marriage is kind of a new development. It hasn't been around for a long time. So I would say that's largely form. What about the sun? Again, it's a word. We're just using a word to describe something that's pure substance. Everyone knows. Everyone can see the sun. It's very observable. It's very. You can study it. Everyone can see it. Everyone can see its effects. That, I would say, is pure substance. So what's common in all of these examples is that you're starting with some form, some verbal form, but you're searching reality. You're searching your observable reality to see if the verbal formula has any underlying substance in reality. You're really actually searching. You're looking around. You're questioning. You're examining evidence. You're thinking critically, and you're making assessments of what is pure verbal form and what has some substance and what's in between. And if you do this long enough, and I think if you get good at it, then I think there is you'll see there's a lot of form out there. Actually, there's a lot of mixed form or even pure form out there. And why is that? Why is there so much form? That's kind of a question I was interested in. Why is it that, isn't that kind of weird that we have language that creates all this form that doesn't correspond to anything within reality that anyone experiences or has experienced? And I think we'll turn to Jung now, and I think one thing he says in one of his essays, School Years, and he says this in a couple areas, and the problem he identifies, and I think the problem that leads to this kind of form, verbal forms, are that people in general take verbal concepts that they learn or they pick up somewhere and they don't question the underlying reality. And I want to read two statements. One is on page, from Jung, one's on page 46, where he writes, "All the people about me seem to take jargon for granted, and the dense obscurity that emanated from it. Thoughtlessly, they swallowed all the contradictions." That's on page 46. Let me read that again. "All the people about me seem to take the jargon for granted, and the dense obscurity that emanated from it. Thoughtlessly, they swallowed all the contradictions." Then on page 54, he's talking about his dad, and he says about his dad, he was doing some ritual, and he says, "I had the impression that something was being performed here in the traditionally correct manner. My father, too, seemed to be chiefly concerned with going through it all according to rule, and it was part of this rule that the appropriate words were read or spoken with emphasis." So words, verbal formulas, and the like are used. They contain, in Jung's words, jargon, obscurity, contradictions, trite formulas, but they're accepted and they're not examined enough to see what is the underlying reality, if any. And I think that is one reason we have form, a lot of verbal form out there. Now, I think if you start questioning how much reality there is to various verbal forms, then you will probably, I think, make some very interesting personal discoveries of what is form and what isn't, and you'll make those discoveries for your own personal reasons, with your own rationales. For example, in the example I gave earlier, with respect to, let's say, all lawyers are politicians or crooks, you might have different reasons for thinking or different rationales for why it's a form, and you might have different examples. And so I think you will gradually make your own discoveries, and because you are using your own sense perception of reality for yourself to determine what is real and what's form and what does not have, what has substance and what doesn't have substance. And I think this process, if you engage in it long enough, I'm fairly convinced it's bound to strengthen you, bound to make you a more strong, mentally strong person, self-assured and self-confident, and because you're not taking pure form seriously, and because of that, you're not being sort of what I would use the expression, you're not being weighed down needlessly by things that are pure form. You're only taking into account things that are actually a reality, and when you do that, you see that there's a lot of things that you don't have to be weighed down by. There's a lot of things you don't have to be fearful of. There's a lot of things you don't have to be concerned about as much as you are, because they're form. They don't exist. They only exist within the mind, and they only exist within verbal formula that doesn't correspond to anything anyone can see within reality or can observe. And I think that process will strengthen you, and I think it did for Jung. And I think it did for Jung, and I think he was someone that from an early age, as you can see in his essay School Years, he didn't take form seriously. He looked for the underlying reality, and because of that, he felt he became a stronger person. I want to read two quotations that make that very clear. He says on page 47, "These were the crucial experiences of my life. It was then that it dawned on me. I must take the responsibility. It is up to me how my fate turns out. I have been confronted with a problem to which I have to find the answer." So it's a responsibility, in the context of our discussion, I would say it's the responsibility of each person to individually figure out what is form and what's substance within their life, within their perception of reality. And that is, it is a problem that sort of we don't really ask for, but in the context of being social beings, in the context of living within a society as we must, it's something that we have to face. And then on page 70 he says, whereas formerly I had been shy, timid, mistrustful, pallid, thin, and apparently unstable in health, I now began to display a tremendous appetite on all fronts. I knew what I wanted and I went after it. I also became noticeably more accessible and more communicative. I discovered that poverty was no handicap and was far from being the principal reason for suffering, that the sons of the rich really did not enjoy any advantages over the poor and ill-clad boys. There were far deeper reasons for happiness and unhappiness in one's allotment of pocket money. I made more and better friends than before. I felt firmer ground under my feet and even summoned up courage to speak openly of my ideas. And I think that's a clear demonstration for Jung of what happened when he began to question the various forms and verbal forms that were around him that he didn't believe had underlying realities, or that had exaggerated realities that were more form than substance, or in sort of the mixed example we talked about. So I think in this sense, wisdom is, from the account we've been developing here, is this ability to discern and distinguish between verbal form and substance, to get it right more. You're going to make errors, but I think to get it right more often than not. And I think this process of doing this, I think literally creates space and breathing room for you to pursue those things that actually have substance, and to avoid those that don't. And I think you're doing this over many years correctly is bound to be good, because you're using your finite energy and time, in more good ways and more efficient ways. And because of that, I think you're going to make errors, like we said. But if you see, but I think if you get better at this over time, I think you'll see the rewards sort of build up over many years. And obviously, I think if you start seeing form and distinguishing it and seeing the characteristics of it, you will over time get probably better even at distinguishing the one from the other. And so it's sort of in one of our discussions, I sort of discussed the virtuous circle. I think this would sort of be another virtuous cycle or circle that could start to develop. So that's it for today. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.